Hello, my students. Welcome you back to the subject of professionalism and in interpretation and translation. Today, we are going to explore about the concept of copy editing in module number 3. Now, let's start the lesson. First, have a look at the overview of the whole lesson. We are going to talk about the house style, the spelling and typing errors, the discussions on syntax and idiom, punctuation, uses. Okay, so we have some notes before the lesson. In these lessons, there will be 5 headings, and the term house style here is the first one. Then we're going to have some ideas on spelling, syntax and idiom, punctuation and correct uses. And remember that grammar and punctuation are often lengthy. However, luckily they are not the main focus of this lesson because elsewhere you have the knowledge and theories on these two concepts. And there will be cases when you find a little bit a kind of overlapping between the concepts of copy editing, stylistic editing, structural editing, and content editing. However, there exists a combination of such types of editing. However, this is not the focus of this lesson. We will have another module to talk about just editing. We also may come to the terms like micro level and macro level changes. So, firstly, what is copy editing? Copy editing is a kind of corrections that bring the text into conformance with the preset rules. So, conformance with preset rules are the key word here. You cannot develop a rules of yourself. Normally, you have to follow, you have to obey to some rules that have been preset beforehand or in advance. So the first concept here is house style. Sometimes we can name house style as style sheets. Style sheets. Look at the picture here. There are some examples of the style sheets or manual or house style. The style sheet will be typical of one publisher or publishing houses, and other institutions like the governments, the newspapers, university presses, or editor association can have different types of manuals or style sheets. So, house style is a matter of choice. Each institution will specify how to spell the numbers, how to write the date and times, how to abbreviate some short words, how to capitalize the words, how to make the hyphens, which word to use instead of which ones, and which words to avoid. For example, one publishing house may ask you to write the numbers in digits, like the number 8, number 3, like this one. However, other institutions may ask you to write the numbers in letters like 3, THREE. Okay. So therefore, you see that style manuals and style sheets can help create a distinctive institutional voice and visual image for a publication. And a house style, they also create a degree of consistency in journals, magazines, and collections of articles, where several different authors are contributing to a single issue or book. The person who does these things, who makes sure that all of the submission to one publication share the same style, is the copy editor. Once a contribution or submission arises, it is up to the copy editor to check that the instructions have been followed. In section 2, we are going to discuss on spelling and typing errors. To be honest, spelling errors are really bad because it can leave a very bad and negative impressions in the eyes of the reader or the audience, the ones who may think that the writers or thinkers are sloppy and are not very careful. So this one can lead to the reader's suspect, okay, and as well as distracted meaning. The reader here can not understand the right meaning of the message once there are misspelled words in the text given. For example, these are some of the pairs that are normally misspelled: adopt and adapt, aptitude and attitude, message and massage. Okay. Therefore, we have a number of advice for you when it comes to spelling and typing errors. Firstly, remember that Microsoft Office Word or the word processing software are very helpful with the spell checker function. However, you shouldn't, or you do not trust it every time you check your documents, because they can have some weaknesses and pitfalls. Here are the examples of its weaknesses. The sentence given is: our health center worked in partnership with Mark Frost. This one is an English term, right? And Frost means something in the dictionary in English. However, if you put this one into the Word document, the Word document processor cannot detect that this one is wrong, this one is misspelled. Why so? Because here in the context of this sentence, Frost here is a kind of company's or firm, and it is a German word. So this one is correct and this one is not correct at all, though it exists in English, but with have a very different meaning. The rule number 2 here is to be aware of possible ways of spelling. Many words can have more than one way of spelling, like the word lifestyle, and maybe they have very different frequency of occurrence, right? The middle one here is the most popular, right, that you can see. The third rule is to follow a style sheet. Okay. Question or advice number 4. The piece of advice number 4 is to search for relative frequency of 2 words versus 1 word treatment of compounds, and the difference in American English and British English. For example, these are the compound words, and you should bear in mind or notice the use of hyphen here, when or with or without the hyphen here, which one is more common. The piece of advice number 5 is: in case of breaking long words at the end of lines like this one, you should be aware of the idea, the fact that there are 2 ways. In American English, normally people break the long words phonetically. We will break at phonetically natural point, triumphant. However, in British English, the rule is to break morphologically, triumphant. Okay, triumph is a word, is a root, a stem. For syntax and idiom discussions in copy editing, let's have a look at a sample sentence and point out what is wrong with this sentence grammatically. He washes frequently his teeth, sometimes after every dining. There are 3 problems, to be honest. The first one here is the position of the adverb frequently. This one must be before the verb wash, or must precede the main verb wash. The second is the kind of collocation mistake. We don't say wash teeth, we say clean or brush teeth. And the third problem here is a kind of wording. We don't say every dining, instead every meal. So these are the mistakes that are committed by a non-native speaker or a writer, and even for the native speakers, they can make the mistake. For example, sometimes because they are not the one who are the experts in one field, one specialized field, so they can make the order of the words wrong. Okay, we do. For example, we have the term severe summer weather. They are very common in use by the non-expert native speakers. However, the right term should be summer severe weather, because we can also have winter severe weather conditions. Or another example is like this: when the native speaker or writer depend too much in word processor, they can have some words missing or some words that are added, some actual words. Look at this sentence. There may be word missing or one unwanted actual word if during self-editing the writer pressed the delete key once too often or not often enough. Did you notice the missing word? One missing word and one actual word in the previous sentence. I'll illustrate one of the actual words, that is an or one here, right? We just use one of them, either an or one. For some missing words, you can look at the first sentence. It is like this: there should be an article or a determiner before the head noun here, right? So there may be one word missing or a word missing. The other mistakes by native speakers can be mistakes on concord or subject and verb agreement, and sometimes we think of the right word but the mind retrieves the wrong word, or we type out the wrong word. And another mistake source can be the influence by the source language or the source text. For syntactic change and variability, we know that just like every other phenomenon in modern life, which suffer from changes in political, economic, and cultural shifts, then syntactic change is unavoidable. There are many new words appear. There are many new terms appear and in use among the youngsters, right? Now let's come to the punctuation discussions. Punctuation can be understood in two types of senses. In narrow sense, there are some, let's say, more than 10 types of marks. Look at the picture on the top corner of the screen. Here we can say that there are a period, a comma, a colon, until a hyphen. In broad sense, punctuation is a concept that also covers word space like this one, between two words, word space, or the paragraphing, indentation, capitalization. Though this one can be the concept of stylistic and structure editing too. So, in the first three sections, we talk about the grammar, the spelling, and now we talk about the punctuation. They are all kinds of the mistakes that you should copy edit when you are doing editing. Now we come to the uses, language uses. Here on the screen you can see 5 sentences, and these 5 sentences are actually a topic of debate among 2 groups of linguists. The group number 1 believe that the sentence like 2 here are tolerable, tolerated and acceptable, and do not violate any English grammatical rules. A flock of birds were alighting here and there around the field. However, the second group is the opponents who believe that these fights are not acceptable. And do you know the reason why? Yeah, they believe that there should be a kind of subject and verb agreement here, and this one should be the verb in singular form, not plural form. Just similarly, we have the two terms stay home and stay at home. For those who follow the first book, then the two sentences are both correct, right? It is acceptable to say stay home. However, the second group believe that we can't say stay home, we have to say stay at home. So, if you are an editor, how far should you go in enforcing correct uses? How to decide yourself on which ways to use, which uses is preferred? Since various published authorities often do not agree on particular points of uses, you will need to adopt an approach. So choose one approach for you to each contentious point. Sometimes your employer's style guide or a senior editor will decide the matter for you, but more often you will have to decide yourself. You must remember that if you adopt a conversation position, you risk being branded as out of touch with the younger generation. What does that mean? Yeah, if you want to be a conservative person about the uses of language, then the younger generation may consider you to be out of touch, to be something of the past. You cannot keep up with the social movements or other sources of linguistic innovation. Okay, so there is a fact that we cannot, as an editor, satisfy everyone. Adopt a style for you or listen to someone senior to you, like your employer. And at other times, you have to rely on sources whose judgments are based on actual investigation of what appears to be acceptable and not. For example, this one is in case of Canadian English. If you want to be editing a text for Canadians with the verb substitute, pay special attention to this slide. According to the Webster Dictionary of English and the Oxford Dictionary of English, it is totally acceptable to write they substitute X with Y. However, this kind of writing, they substitute X with Y, is not acceptable in Canadian Oxford Dictionary. Instead, in Canadian English, you have to write or to say they substitute Y for X or replaced X with Y. So, as an editor Canadian audience or traditionalist, you should use the structures like they substitute Y for X or replaced X with Y. Okay. So the copy editors have to catch a great many different kinds of errors all at once. We have the grammar, we have the spellings, we have the punctuation, we have the kind of errors in uses, like errors that affect words or phrases or affect larger units. So we have some advice now. Firstly, well through a text twice, once paying attention to micro-level problems and once to macro-level problems. And two, when practicing full copy editing for all types of error, you should count the numbers of problems of each type so that you don't miss even each type of problem or each type of error. So that is the end of module number 3. Now let's come to module number 4, stylistic editing. Um, in module number 3, we talk about how to make changes, how to edit, right? So that we can conform to some preset rules. Now we talk about a kind of editing that is quite hard, because much harder because these types of editing, stylistic editing, do not involve any applying rules. Here we have to tailor the vocab and sentence structure to a particular group of reader of the text and to their use. And also we have to create a smooth flowing text by fixing problems of poor inter-sentence connections, wrong focus within sentences, confusing verbosity, and awkward sentence structures. So, have a look back at the overview of this module: how to tailor language to the readers, the problem of flow, smoothing, the problem of readability versus intelligibility and logic, the problem of stylistic editing during translation, and some kind of traps to avoid. Now, tailoring language to the readers, or change the language, customize the language to the readers. Editors of original writing, unlike revisers in translation, usually know who is going to be reading the text. So, luckily, right, we can know in advance who will be the reader of the text. Not just like for the case of translation reviser who don't know who will be the audience. So tailoring for non-readers, it makes easier. We have some reason to do the stylistic editing. Firstly, it is motivation. If we can edit the style of a text, we can liven up, spice up the writing in order to make the reading experience more enjoyable, more interesting, more receivable to not ready motivated intended readers, to satisfy even the indifferent and not ready motivated intended readers, right? So we can help them create motivation for these type of readers. Another reason for stylistic editing is knowledgeability. Sometimes if we use a language that is too plain or simple, then a specialist, the expert, will feel that they are not being addressed properly if the concepts familiar to them are repeated and spelled out and too explicit. So, on this diagram, you can see a kind of a relationship between the levels of redundancies and explicits and the group of readers. If the readers are the laymen and the outsiders of one field are the non-specialists, you should keep the text redundant and explicit so that they can understand it well. However, if the readers are the experts or specialists in one field, you don't have to be that explicit or redundant. Try to reduce the level of redundancy or explicitness. They can understand well the concepts without much explanation. Similarly, we as an editor of style or stylistic editors have to think of the two problems here. You will see that for the non-specialist reader, we have to face with more difficulties to edit, because we have to maybe add some ideas, explain something to make sure that they can understand the text well, right? But for the specialist reader, normally we don't have to make any changes for a given text, especially for the text with jargons. The reader who are the specialists still can well understand what the text means. So editing for knowledgeability writer overlaps with content editing. We can make some change to the word here, right? So it is a little bit overlapped with content editing. That is not just the language but the coverage or the content of the topics to be suited to the knowledge of the reader. Another reason is education. Look at the example here. We have two structure sharing the same meaning. In the event of your being evicted, and if you are evicted, you'll see that the first structure is nominal and the second one is verbal. The first structure here sounds very formal, very academic, very kind of hard to understand, right? However, this one sounds more plain, and most of people can understand easily the verbal structure instead of the nominal structure. So you should base on the education level of the reader to decide on which structure to use. For the reader without post-secondary education, you should use a language of like thought, like this one, right? Instead of cognition. For the reader who do not have high education but are specialists in the field, you can use both. However, for the mass readership, you should use a plain and simple word. And it is a good idea that you test the edited version on some members of the intended readership before you launch the text to the wider readership. The next reasons are the language. We have to customize the language, especially for the recent immigrants or the people who are not very into informal language. Each pair of the sentences here share the same meaning. However, they sound very different in terms of language use. She ran into and she happened to meet, right? The second one here should be the one to say to the recent immigrant. However, for the native speaker, we can still say she ran into Professor Plum, and the native speaker can still understand this one, what I mean. Similarly to the use of flops and failures, not for six and got sick. So we can either paraphrase or eliminate words which are hard to understand by the immigrants or the non-native speaker. The next reasons is a problem of space and time, or time and space. You should bear in mind that the reader's geographical location can affect the way or how well they understand a text. For example, for the British English user, we say revise, but the case is review in American English. Similarly, we may be editing material that were written many years ago, decades ago, or even more than decades ago, and these contain a lot of obsolete words that the reader cannot know. They use a lot of archaic language like LB, therefore, herein. Then, depending on the future reader, you should customize the language, change the language use. The next reason is based on the relationship between the writer and the reader, and think of the context of use, of text use. Think of the questions like how, where, when, and why. For example, how will the document be read aloud? Will the document be read aloud or silently by the user? Will the reader be reading the document through the whole from start to finish, or will they be consulting just sections of it? Like another is a question of where, like whether or not they watch the slide presentation or they pass aside, or is it a kind of how can I say, a guideline, or what are their reasons for reading, for enjoyment, for pass the time, or for obtaining instructions, things like that. So here's an example for you. The situation here is a kind of editing an instruction to use in the lift in a skyscraper. We have two versions. Press the button should be pressed, and the operator will press the button. And you'll see that maybe option A is the best one, right? Because we need to be brief, short and brief in case of instruction. Or just like this one, though it is not a kind of editing, we are doing some example for the revision. You see that the same rules apply. It is a tourist brochure, and for traveling purposes, the words, the sentence should sound enchanting, attracting, right? And if you see that, then A is a better choice, right? A is a better choice because it is really close to the text. Okay. Alright. Now we talk about the problem of smoothing. Smoothing text or a smooth reading text share the following features. Firstly, it is clear to know what goes with what within each sentence. Like this one. These ones are not very clear. Parents with children who want to be at the front should arrive at the parade early. So we can't know who should arrive at the parade early, the parents or the children. If you put the relative clause who want to be at the front like this, and we can't know if, right, who here refer back to parents or to children. The same with another examples like this. Another feature is that the subject and the verb of the main clause are easily located and are also fairly too close to each other. Or each sentence is properly related to the preceding sentence in terms of information flow and focus. It is a very basic and fundamental rule in English paragraph writing. You must make sure that each sentence are connected. Each sentence is connected to each other. The preceding one is followed and connected to the next one in terms of flow and focus. So we have a very good example here. Read the two and decide on which has a better flow, para A or para B. The only difference between the two is the use of comma before the phrase, such as. So far, the discussion has been about the features, the characteristics of the reader, such as knowledgeability and education. Also, important is the text used, how, where, and why it will be read. So, what do you think about the answer? Which one has a better flow of effort here? You'll see that B has a better flow, right? Why so? Look at A first. If I do not use any comma before the phrase such as, like this, the discussion has been about legibility and education. If no comma here is used, then the next sentence should be about, should be discussions on knowledgeability and another on education. Okay. However, here I see just another sentence. another sentence with another theme or topic, the use of the text. However, for para B, because the comma here indicates that the phrase such as knowledge, ability, and education is optional, so there's no need to make another two sentences on knowledge and education, right? I can put a period here and talk about a very new idea that is equal and equivalent to the first sentence. So B has a better flow. We have other features to make a text sound smooth. That is the use of connector words, the use of signposts, which are not misleading. Parallel ideas are expressed through parallel forms. The antecedents of pronouns are immediately clear. The correct interpretation of noun sequences and other ambiguity is clear from the context. So, these are very important rules for you when you when you stylistic edit a text given. The other example is contradiction or readability and intelligibility, whether or not the text is comprehensible, is understood, and logical. We have two examples here of irreadability or the sentence with contradiction. The restaurant opens at 5 and it begins serving between 4 and 9. So it is nonsense, right? Or John will be a little bit late for the party. He died yesterday. Yeah, this one is so hard to read, understand. It's illogic. For stylistic editing during translation, this one should be your self-study because we can have much detailed discussions on this in the translation revision modules. And finally, I want you to write a reflection on some kind of risks or traps faced by the stylistic editors, and you should suggest how you can avoid them. You should write your answers in about 90 words. And thank you for your listening at the end of these two modules.